as knowledge brokers and professional development leaders, educators, what does this integrated approach to comprehension mean to you? And particularly, what does it mean in the classroom to you? And Alison, let's have you start first. I'm very curious about your thoughts.
It's a really good question. I've seen it throughout. I think one of the large misnomers in education in particular is that comprehension is one thing, and it's just understanding the main points of a story. But there are so many factors that come into play when students are reading for them understanding it. Yep. And it's beyond just the main idea. And so much of what the research has come up with now is the idea of building that background knowledge and building and activating it so that students can be successful and fill in those gaps as students are reading and going. And I, as a learning specialist, I saw it pretty consistently how hard it was for students to not only decode, but then to take that step further, which is the whole purpose of reading, to be able to comprehend and understand. And without building their foundational knowledge and building the background, as well as giving them strategies for when they get confused, it was really hard for them to understand. And I will say so much of our reading work in general in classrooms is focused on the decoding aspect, and comprehension is sometimes the left behind.
Well, I like what you talked about, this multiple skills, and when you mentioned some of these discrete skills like decoding, I won't get into too much as fluency is a skill and a process and an outcome, right? But I'm closing my eyes and depicting the Scarborough reading rope, and we know from Dr. Hollis Scarborough's work, and I really love, again, how we see a lot of other researchers framing this in their work, that all of these skills are really important, and the practice, the automaticity, the strategy are all moving together to make sure that all these skills are coming together. And then in the role of knowledge, when you talked about decoding at the word reading level, background knowledge plays an important role, right? In their knowledge of vocabulary and word reading, as it does in all these other elements of word reading and comprehension. And so I think that was, I really liked what you talked about that, and particularly in working with kids who struggle. I wanted to reference a couple of studies because a lot of our readers are like, now where do I go? Yes. And the one that I'm always left with is, not as much a study, but more of he does an incredible job of surveying the research and offering a commentary, was Dr. Hugh Katz, who is a friend of Reed, friend of the Windward Institute, as our community lecturer, where he talks about comprehension as being not a single skill, but involving a lot of multi-components to it. Yeah. What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's what makes comprehension so tricky, right? It makes it so tricky to conceptualize, to understand. It makes it tricky to teach. It makes it tricky when you are listening to a student read and then you ask them a question and they have no idea what they just read, right? There's so many places where it could have gone wrong.
Yep.
And it's so hard as the teacher to have to play, little brain detective to see where that breakdown happened.
Right.
And I just love the Scarborough rope because I think it's just such a beautiful metaphor of showing not only the individual strands, but like you said, how they're so connected and interdependent and develop over time. I think it really helps to explain just truly how complicated comprehension can be.
Yeah.
And all of the different pieces of the puzzle that the reader needs to come away with an accurate understanding of the text.
Yep.
So it's really hard to teach, and I think in my own experience, I definitely grew up in a time where it was like, we're going to focus on the main idea this week. And I'm sure that it was a lot easier for me to identify the main idea about a topic that I was more familiar with rather than something that was like brand new to me. And I was still good at identifying the main idea, right? But maybe I was less familiar with, I don't know, the rules of cricket, right? Yeah. I don't know.
And you probably couldn't go deep enough for any questions beyond those surface level questions.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's what's been really different about Windward, because Windward has this tradition of viewing comprehension in a different way, in a knowledge-based way. Yeah. Whereas a lot of schools, things are changing. But, for the last, I don't know how many years, 20, 30 years, right? Many schools have approached comprehension in more of a strategy approach. Yep. But here, I think because with our deep connection to our writing program, knowledge has really always been at the forefront of our program. And I'm really proud to be able to say that about what we're doing here and what we've been doing here for years, because I do think that we've been kind of pioneers here in a very different landscape in education.